All right, everybody, welcome to the illumINNATE Barcelona podcast. This is our third episode. We have Sammy Hansen with us today. She's originally from Nebraska. She moved to Barcelona after graduating from the University of Nebraska, and she has lived here for the last 7 years. Again, we think that this is the best city in the world. We love Barcelona. It's such an amazing city, and we want to know why these people ended up in Barcelona and what they do to contribute to this city to be the most amazing city in the world, in my opinion. And many people think exactly the same as I do. So she works in marketing, and she's been going to ICB Church for the last 5 years. This is our church. It's an amazing church, amazing community here in Barcelona. She did her master's in marketing in Barcelona also, and she's had a lifestyle and travel blog since 2012. This is something that really caught our attention. She talks in the blog about, or she writes in the blog about reading, traveling, cooking. She has really cool recommendations for expats living here in Barcelona, travel recommendations in Europe. Now, during this coronavirus crisis, she's been writing about it too, doing some recommendations for people too. She has recommendations what to do in the city of Barcelona, misconceptions about living abroad. There's so many really cool things that I'm excited to talk with Sammy. So Sammy, welcome to the illumINNATE Barcelona podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're so excited. And we were talking before we went live that her fiance is actually from Cordoba. So I am from Cordoba, and Sammy's fiance is also from Cordoba, and my wife and Sammy are from the US. So we have so many small world. And also we could talk hours and hours about the crazy stuff, intercultural relationships. And we're both also living in Barcelona, which is crazy. But Sammy, I want to start with, so we know you're from Nebraska, but how in the world did you end up in Barcelona? Why did you come here?
Well, I like many Americans probably, I started studying Spanish in middle school. That was the first time we were like formally introduced to a different language other than English. And then I studied it through high school and then also at the University of Nebraska, and always really liked it. Was always really interested in it. And then in university, one of my first and favorite teachers happened to be Spanish teachers, was from Bilbao, Spain. And she heard that I was interested in studying abroad. And I think I had always thought like I would probably go somewhere in South America. And she convinced me to study abroad in Spain. So then I studied abroad 2 summers, one in Bilbao, and then the next summer in Barcelona, and loved it, fell in love with Spain. What's not to like? And then after I went back to Nebraska, graduated, I moved here a month after I graduated school with a friend, and we moved to Barcelona, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, this is what happened with this beautiful city. You just come and it kind of like grabs you. It's like, yeah, you got to come and stay here forever.
Yeah. And it's a pretty common story that people weren't intending on staying as long as they did. And
yeah. Then you come here and you fall in love. So Sammy, I want to ask you, because you have a blog, and blogging has been changing over the past years. You know, at the beginning we started with the traditional blog, podcast, WordPress, and writing, and doing like blog posts, like really long writing posts with pictures and stuff. But now it's kind of shifting on like just doing social media posts and stuff like that. Like, why do you keep doing it? Or why do you like writing? What do you like about the traditional website blog, or how it is now for you?
Yeah, I remember when I like started my blog was my senior year of college, and Tumblr was really popular then. Like, and that was again a very like visual format, very little text and whatnot. And I originally opened my blog, I've always had it in WordPress. And that was because I always was more attracted to like long format writing. I had like gone back and forth growing up between wanting to be a professional writer, and it's just always something I've liked to do. And it attracted me much more than just sharing like purely images. So I remember that's why I started in WordPress. And then now more recently of like me, I'm kind of, it's been kind of a revival process of my blog more recently. And I remember because I work in marketing, I've had social media based jobs. I'm very familiar with like social media and blogging for personal and professional use. And I had a friend be like, why are you going to like really go back to WordPress and like really work at it more when you could just do your Instagram? And I thought about it, but I know you like, yes, perhaps you just write a long caption and then you're done.
Yeah.
I just like the like more traditional long format. Like it feels like, to me, it's like you're writing an article. I like having it all in one place and not, because, you know, you have your Instagram feed is just visual. So if it was
exactly.
So that's kind of why I've still, and I know that only a fraction of, because I do use social media and I promote what I post on WordPress through my social media channels. And I know that perhaps only a fraction of people actually go to the blog and, read what I write. But I think in that way, perhaps I'd rather like quality over quantity. At least those people really are interested in what I have to say and want to be there.
Totally. And that's awesome. And I'm saying this, like, not saying why you're not doing it any other way. I actually love the way that you're doing it, and you're really good writing. Then we're going to put the info, or if you want to say how can people go to your blog? What's the address?
So my blog, the URL is just www.samhopehansen.com.
Perfect. We'll put it in the comment when we post the podcast, and also the video, so you guys can access easily. And you write really well, and you can tell the difference when it's different from an Instagram post. You can actually develop an article with pictures and explain yourself, and it's awesome. And I think that it's great, and we're losing that, and I think it's really, really amazing. I want to ask you so many things, Sammy. I'm excited, but I'm going to start with the places in Barcelona that you will recommend, to tourists and also people that live here. What are the places that we should go here in Barcelona?
Wow, so many places. I think the first thing I always ask people, whether they're like new to the city or they're visiting, is how much time do you have? Because, if they have one day, then of course, like if you have one day in Barcelona, of course you should go see the Sagrada Familia if you've never done that yet. But I think if they do have more time, or if you are new to the city, I love not just the typical Gaudi routes or Paseo de Gracia or Las Ramblas. To me, one of the most underrated parts of the cities, and I'm extremely biased because I live here, but is Poblenou. It's like, if anyone's familiar with Barcelona, we have all the beach, and there's the old fisherman's neighborhood, which is Barceloneta, which is like the typical beaches that people think about when you picture Barcelona. If you keep going down the beach, I guess the direction would be north.
Yeah.
You get to Poblenou and the beaches of of this area, and this whole area there's so much to do. There's so many restaurants and bars and stores, and the Rambla de Poblenou is like Las Ramblas de Barcelona, but more residential, much less touristy, much more authentic. There's always so many people sitting and having food and drinks on the terrace. Yeah. So that's my, Poblenou is my area that I always recommend people if they have time to explore.
Cool.
And then I think another really fun place, if like, as maybe if you haven't done it before, is going to the bunkers. It was like, basically it's like a viewpoint of the city, but it's a great spot because you can like bring a blanket and wine and grapes and whatnot and just hang out up there, and the view is amazing.
Now, I want to ask you about some misconceptions of living abroad. So I know so many people from Argentina, so many people from the US, and always the dream of living in Europe or living somewhere else, and like hashtag, travel life, whatever. But that has some really amazing things. That's why we're doing it, because for us, it has more pros than cons.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about what things do you think that people should know that they might not know about living abroad?
So I have like a ton of what could seem as little examples, but I think something that I heard recently that like really summed up this idea for me was I went to a comedy show of Jim Gaffigan. He's an American comic, and he came to Barcelona recently, and he did this whole show, and he was talking about like the American perspective of all these Spanish traditions and all this stuff, and it was hilarious. But one of the things he talked about was like how no one wants to be a tourist. Like when you travel, no one wants to look like a tourist. No one wants to doing the typical tourist things is like overrated. And he was so funny because he was like, he said he came to Barcelona with his kids, and they were on Las Ramblas or something, and his kids were like, Dad, like, where are the locals? Like, what are the locals doing right now? And he was like, they're working. Like, what do you think they're doing? And it's just so funny because I think people, like, when people who've never lived abroad, or maybe you've never left their hometown or what have you, like when they think of living abroad, they think of, like, if you think of living in Spain, they think that every day we're having sangria and paella and a 3-hour siesta and, all this stuff, which is so far from the truth. And I think like even when I first moved here and I started like kind of getting into more of normal life, there were days where I'd be like, gosh, all I did today was commute, work, do laundry, and work out, and it was like, but that is when you really live somewhere. Of course, you're not doing fun touristy things all the time.
Yeah. And sometimes we do take naps. Sometimes we do drink sangria. But something crazy that, in my opinion, is very different from the US, and what's one of the things that we missed, is the US is so comfy.
Oh my God. Yes.
Every single aspect is so comfortable. You don't have to walk. You don't have to carry your supermarket. All the bag with the food from the supermarket. In some buildings do not have even elevators, so you probably have to go up like 3 or 4 flights of stairs with all the food from the supermarket for that week without an elevator. And that's stuff that doesn't happen in the US. Something else that doesn't happen in the US is that sometimes inside your house you are cold or you are hot.
Yeah. I think that example, like now it's funny because I've been here long enough where I'm like totally converting to the Spanish way of thinking about it. But like the having centralized air or heat in one's home, to me, when I first got here, it was like, oh my gosh, this is definitely like top 5 worst parts of living here. Like it was, Barcelona can be so humid. Then in the winter, the cold is like such a wet cold. But now I'm to the point where like those months in between those summer and winter when you don't have to have any heating or cooling in your house and it's the perfect temperature, like that's priceless. And it's funny to me because I have friends and family in the States who in the winter are sleeping with multiple fans in like t-shirts and shorts. And it's like, you guys, you're missing out on like you're supposed to be cold in the winter. You're supposed to be hot in the summer. Like,
yes. Yeah, that is crazy because in the US, it's like between 70 and 72 Fahrenheit
yeah,
inside your house or in every single building in the
yeah,
city that you live in for the 12 months of the year. So like
yeah,
the whole year you're in the perfect temperature inside. Sometimes it's crazy. You go inside it's somewhere in the summer and it's actually cold. I
oh
remember
yeah,
going, I
oh yeah.
remember we were doing our doctorates and I will have to go with a jacket during summer, not for the outside, for the inside. So
No, I don't know. It's like, I think I don't know. I don't know how it got so extreme in that way, but that is something that I've come to appreciate here too, because it's just, I think it's more normal, like the way it should be.
So now I want to ask you, and then if you can think of any other crazy stuff that is different, you can say it. But I wanted to ask you about some travel recommendations or things that we should do when we travel, and maybe some places to travel here in Europe that you will recommend.
I think a recommendation that, like, one of the ones that comes to the top of my mind is, I know, especially like Americans, I think because many times they're not as frequent of travelers as Europeans, for example, are. They're really used to like buying travel, whether that be plane tickets or hotels or whatever it is, like over 6 months in advance or something like that, even if it's a small trip. And I think something I have become much more European, and just, I think once you travel more, you come to realize this, that you do not necessarily need to book with that much time in advance. And there is a lot to be said for like shopping around and looking for the best deal. So I think that's something I'm like always telling my friends, like, just because it's now under 6 months doesn't mean you have to get the first ticket you see. Like, there will still be tickets a month away, and perhaps they're going to be cheaper. So don't freak out. I think as far as like, I think Europe is there. I mean, I've lived here for 7 years and I feel like I still haven't even seen 10% of what there is to see. So I always, especially like if people are coming from the States or Argentina or wherever, I'm like, come for as much time as you can so that you can bop around. Spain, of course, I'm very biased, but I think has so much to see. So I think definitely like, giving yourself enough time and not doing like the one day per city. I think, some people get a little over ambitious, and it's better to like really be able to explore places. And because if you have like 1 or 2 days per place and you have 10 destinations in a 2-week period, like you're not even going to enjoy, you're just going to be extremely exhausted.
Yes. It gets really exhausted. Like traveling is exhausting,
Like being on the move.
Yeah, being on the move is exhausting. And, exactly those trips that people plan that it's like a week, 10 cities. It's like, what? Like, how can you do that?
Yeah. I mean, that to me, that's like, okay, you went somewhere and you had your foot on that city's ground and then you left. Like, you don't get a feel of the place. You don't get to, I mean, you should at least be somewhere for a few days to really like explore it.
So if you can recommend somebody that only has like 3 weeks vacations a year, and they have to choose, okay, do I see in 3 weeks 10 cities, or do I just do 4? And
I would do, if I had some, I mean, I really think even with 3 weeks, I would still say 4 places. And I think I'm, again, just biased towards like Southern Europe, mostly because it's what I've personally had the chance to explore more. I've backpacked in Spain, Italy, France, and Portugal, and there is so many like cities and towns and coasts and islands just in Southern Europe that is easier, you know, the flights usually then your flights would be like an hour, under 2 hours. And so it's easier to do kind of a route. I think definitely if you're doing like a 3-week trip and you have, you know, a handful of places, like definitely do a few of like, you know, the most popular cities, whether that's like Paris or Rome or whatnot, but then also like kind of do some of your own research. Maybe you're really interested in wine, or maybe you like to surf or whatever, and like kind of pinpoint some other places that are more special to you than just like, you know, when you Google top cities in Europe, what comes up.
Nice. And what was the place that blew your mind? That absolutely blew your mind when you went to that, or maybe you wasn't expecting, and then you got to that city and you were like, oh my gosh, why nobody comes here?
So I think to me, like Spain has so much to offer. And so I think places I remember that I've gone to and that I still recommend people going, and that every time I, like, even if I've been to them several times, they just, like, I love would be like southern Spain, like Seville, Granada, Mallorca sometimes gets a bad rap as like one of the islands, but I think it's usually the best value for your money, and it's beautiful. So Mallorca, southern Spain, and then of course Costa Brava, like the north of Barcelona. That little stretch of coast is so beautiful. It rivals anything in the Caribbean. The little towns are so beautiful and cheap, and fresh seafood, and all so picturesque. And I would definitely recommend
That's awesome.
that.
And of course, we both go to ICB Church. So for me, an expat hack of Barcelona is going to ICB, because you'll find great people, great community, great church. I mean, everything is great at ICB. For us, it was a blessing here in Barcelona to make friends, make connections.
Definitely.
So do you have any other recommendation or any hacks for expats here in Barcelona that they should know or they should do, or something that you figured out after a couple of years and you were like, oh my gosh, I wish somebody told me that when I just got here?
Yeah, so many things that I wish I would have known back then. But I definitely think like you were just saying, I mean, if you are a Christian or you're open to that sort of thing, like ICB, the International Church Barcelona, is a great. I always recommend that to expats or otherwise, if they are struggling to make friends or like find community, or because sometimes it is true that like Barcelona, the Catalan people, like if you're trying to make local friends, sometimes that can definitely be harder as like a expat. And ICB has been where I've met some of the friendships that I've had for the longest here. It's also nice because, of course, Barcelona is very transient. So many people at ICB do come and go as well. But there are also a lot of people that are in Barcelona for kind of a long haul. And so that has been where I've made my friends that I've, you know, been able to keep here. I think other recommendations, I think, I don't know, I always recommend people, like wherever you're from, of course, you're going to keep your traditions and your customs and your everything. But I think it is important too that like you're hopefully choosing to live here. So, you know, it also is really good and really beneficial to like kind of adapt to the local culture, whether that's like maybe in the United States, you used to have dinner at 5:30 p.m. and, you know, that's not common here. So like adapt a little bit to the local culture. And like we don't really drive in the city here, like on average. So, I walk everywhere. I do the beasing, like the bike sharing program. There's so many options. And I think if you like adapt more to the local culture, it'll be much easier to find local friends, feel at home here, make roots.
That's awesome. And my last question is, because it's kind of hard sometimes to find a good place to live here in Barcelona, or like what neighborhoods, where should I live as an expat that comes to Barcelona? Do you have any recommendations on places? I know you live in Poblano. Like, will you recommend Poblano or any other areas to live?
Yeah, in my 7 years here, I've lived in Gracia, Barceloneta, Poblano, and then when I was a student, I lived in the Sagrada Familia area. I think it definitely depends on, like, I know so many people who go to ICD live in the Champlain area. And so, I think you always have to think about, like, okay, what's most important to you? What do you want to be close to? For us, it has always been like Damien's family who lives here and who has always lived in Poblano, and being close to the beach. That was really important to us too. So I think you have to think of what maybe you want to be close to work, maybe it's church, maybe it's the mountains, to be on the total other side of the city. I think also too, if you have a very limited budget, of course it's worth looking into like the outside parts of Barcelona, like Castelldefels, Sant Cugat. Maybe you're not necessarily in the heart of the city, but you might get more value sometimes living outside of the city.
That's awesome. All right, Sammy, thank you so much again for your time and for sharing. Again, guys, go to her blog. It's going to be on the info on Facebook and on YouTube. We're going to make sure that we mention, and also on the podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, it's going to be on the description of the episode, so you can go and read it and connect with Sammy. All right, Sammy, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great. I'm so glad we got to do this.
Yes, thank you.